Okay, now I want to prepare some images for my web page. Now I'm using Photoshop right now, so if you need to, go ahead and open up Photoshop. And remember, whenever we work in Photoshop or Dreamweaver on a public computer, you probably need to go back and reset the workspace. Okay, now the first thing what I'm trying to do is I know that I have a div that has 3 columns in it, and each one of those columns is a div. Now I'm spreading them out by 33%, so each one is going to be 1/3 of the size. Now our expected largest page size is going to be 1200 pixels. So we need to kind of design for that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 3 images that I found on the web, and I'm going to make them about 400 pixels. Now, when we actually get to starting it, I'm going to explain why I don't actually do 400. But because we have 3 images and 3 goes into 1200, 400 times, that's our starting size. The reason why we're resizing these images is because if we don't, first of all, it's bad form. You want the image to be the size that it needs to be. You don't want a 1200 pixel image when you only need a 300 pixel image. That's just wasted bandwidth, and it makes someone look like they don't know what they're doing. So open up Photoshop, go into File, New. Now there's a lot of different ways that you can do this, and I'm going to show you other ways when we do a header image. Right now, what I want is to show you a way that I like. It kind of saves a lot of hassle. I am going to go into Web. I want to make sure that it's set to pixels here. It should if you select Web. And I know that it's going to be 400 pixels wide. The thing is that I'm going to have a margin as well. And so I am going to drop this down to about 350. Now I'm not concerned whether or not it's exact or not. If it's close, if, for example, the column widths end up being 370 each column, and I have an image that's 350, you're not going to see a lot of degradation. It'll be fine. So my goal is to get it close. I also want it to be square. I know my images are square. I specifically picked them because they were square, but I don't know for sure if they're perfectly square. So I'm going to add a little bit of the canvas to just give it a little bit of extra space. Now, if that extra space isn't needed, if those images are exactly square, and we have an extra 20 pixels below, that's not going to be a problem. It's really not going to make a difference. So I'm just kind of, giving it a little bit of slop just in case I might need it. If I don't need it, if anything, it'll give me a margin underneath the image. It'll give that little extra space before the text actually starts. So I'm going to change this to 370 to give it 20 extra pixels height, and I will hit create. Now if we come over here, we can see that we've got everything kind of set up. Here's our layers. I'm going to do a new layer just to see something real quick. This is different than older versions of Photoshop. For some reason, it's calling it an artboard, which technically it should be called a canvas. Okay, so I'm going to go in and place. I'm going to place embedded because I want it to be part of the canvas. Place embedded, and I will go find it. I put them on the desktop, and when I was getting these images, I created a folder for it, and I did that so that I know which images I want to work with. I am going to hit enter here, and I want to make sure that I can edit it. So I'm going to go to, just so that you know, you can control click, hold the control key down and click and hit raster layer, or you can right click on it. And I usually right click, it's a little bit faster. So I right click, and so I've rasterized it. Now I'm going to delete this right here to make sure that there's nothing below it. I'm going to have Command D, and I am going to save it. I'm going to save as, or actually I'm going to export. And I'm going to do a PNG. We can see right here, the PNG, what I'm looking at is 32.9. And I've got transparency ticked. I'm going to hit export all. It asks me where I want to put it. I'm going to put it in the tutorials that we've been working on. And I'm going to call this ZPS. And the only reason why I call it Z is because it will put it down at the bottom. You can see I've already done one here, but I'm going to export. I'm going to replace. And I am going to hide this layer. I'm going to do a new one. And I'm going to File, Place, Embedded. I'm going to grab the second one. I'm going to move it into place. Hit enter to tell it that I'm done editing it. I'm going to rasterize the layer. Now technically you don't have to rasterize it in this situation, but in order to edit it you normally have to. And because I want to make sure that everything works the way I want to make sure that I rasterize all of them. So now I'll go into File, Export As, have PNG selected. I can do JPEG, GIF, or SVG. Transparency, everything looks okay, and it's only 19 kilobits wide. I'll hit export all. I'll go back here to my images, and I'm going to change the name to ZDW for Dreamweaver. I'm going to hide this one, do new, and I would go into File, Place Embedded, and I'll grab my last one, which is Peru State. I'll hit Place. I'm going to move this to where I want it to be. Maybe give it a little bit of extra space there. I want to rasterize it. Okay, now I want to go to File, Export, Export As, PNG, Transparency. I'll hit Export All. I'll hit Export All. I'll go to my tutorials, and I will change the name to Z Peru. Again, I only put the Z there just so that it will put all the images in the same area. You don't have to do that. Okay, so that's it for this part. The next part is going to be doing a header image.
Okay, I want to make sure that I show you how to make images for the header. Now, this video will have how to resize, how to kind of set things up for your images. The header, say images that are included in your web page, and finally, say a background image. All right, so I downloaded this image. There's a lot of different places where you can go to download free images. They're copyright free, so you can use them. There's some limitations on some of them, but for the most part, they're okay. Now, this image is, I think, 1980 or something like that. I think it's 1980. It's full width. So the first thing I'm going to do is if I want to use the full image, I am going to do an image size. I'm in Photoshop. The file is open. I'm going to go into image size. And because my website is going to be no larger than 1200, I'm going to change the width to 1200. Whoops, 1200. Now that adjusts the height as well. We don't want that height. What we're going to do next is we're going to make sure that we get the height that we want. Probably the easiest way for me, use the marquee tool. The rectangular marquee tool, you can kind of click in here. I'm going to choose it, and I'm going to go to fixed size. Now I'm not positive the height, but for this kind of walkthrough on using Photoshop to resize, I'm going to say the width is 1200. Now, when I said fixed size, it means I decide the size that it's going to be. Like I can put 500 by 500 or 200 by 700, anything that I want. And when I go to the selection, that's what I'm going to get. So right now it says 1300. I'm going to put it at 1200. And the height I'm going to put at 400. And we're talking pixels. Now, again, I'm not positive of the height, but for this tutorial, all that matters is that you probably should have the height known. I'm going to hit enter. And now when I click, you'll see the marquee tool kind of give us that. Now the reason why I'm doing it this way is this allows me some freedom to move the selected area around. Now I could actually do I could crop the canvas, but I typically will do it this way, just so that I have a little bit where I can kind of see what's going on. And then I'm going to Command X, so I remove it. I'm going to hide this layer, or actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to do New. And because when I Command X, it created the clipboard. And you can see Photoshop right here is telling me that the clipboard is 1200 by 400 pixels. And that just makes it easy. I'm going to do this, hit create, and now I have a 1200 by 400. If I do Command B, I put that in. All I have to do is save it now. I can put other things in. I can darken it. I can go to Image, Adjustments. Let's do hue saturation. I'm going to decrease the saturation a little bit, or maybe I can increase it. I think right about there. Make it a little bit darker. There's a possibility I'm going to want to put text over the top of it. So if I make it a little bit darker, the text I can make white and it kind of will stand out. When I'm at that point where I feel comfortable that this is the image that I want, I'm thinking that 400 is too much. I think it should be like 250. But for this purpose, I'm going to hit OK. And now all I have to do is save it. File, Save As, or actually I'm going to export as, and I'm going to test to see which is the best. Now this is huge, 585, that's very big. And I don't think that that's what I want. I'm going to untick transparency. I'm going to put it at JPEG. And again, 219. This is one of those examples where PNGs and JPEGs, the JPEG is actually going to save us a lot of space. If I put it to PNG, it jumps up to 530. So JPEG is the option here. Quality is at 100, 219. I'm going to drop the quality down a little bit, maybe down to about 75 or so. And see, now this image is in a good range. I'm going to put it a little bit higher. I think we can work with that. I'm going to export, and I'm going to save it into my folder that has the images in it, and I'm going to call this header microphone. I want to use this for our contact, and I'm going to hit enter, and I'm done with that. The next thing that I want to create is kind of a gradation, and I'm going to do this in such a way as to make it as low file size as I possibly can. And it's important because when we do a background image and we repeat it, we only want to use one image and then repeat it multiple times. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to create a new document, and in this document we're going to have something that repeats, a background that repeats, okay? So it won't look normal on our screen, but it will be fine when we take it into Dreamweaver and put it in a CSS that we say repeat X or repeat Y. So I'm going to do new and put this here, and I'm going to change this to, now remember when we're working with the web it's 72 DPI, so I'm going to put 72 tab 72, so it's a 1 inch by 1 inch square. Now you don't even have to go 1 inch, you can even go smaller, but for our purposes I think this will be workable. We want to kind of see a little bit of it, and I'm going to do a new layer. Now this gives us the area we can, like for example, I'm going to paste in that microphone image that I had earlier, and you can't really see all of it because it's so big, but if I were to move this around you can see that I could use part of that image as a background image. The problem that what happens with something like this is it's hard to tell if it repeats what it's going to look like. It's easier usually if you do a gradient. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to create a gradient. Underneath the fill bucket is the gradient tool. And I'm going to change it to linear. If you look up here, you have like 5 choices. What I want is linear. So I'm going to click on that. Now I'm going to come in here and I'm going to choose the colors. Black to white is what it's set up right now. White. No, let's go. I think we're not technically going to use this. I just kind of want to show you how to do it. So I think the best way to do this is to just choose a color that you can see. So I'm going to do red. And a lot of times it's a good idea to do a transparency. So up here, let's go here. Oh, I need to say okay. Now here you can see that the color is white. Up here is the opacity. And I'm going to put the opacity at 0. So basically what this gradient is doing is it's going from red, the color red that we chose, and the opacity is 100%, it's going red to nothing. So I'm going to hit OK. Now I have to come in. I'm going to create a new layer. I have the one that has the brown on it, but I want a new one. And I am going to use the gradient tool, and I'm going to draw top to bottom. And I'm holding the shift key down to make sure that it's a perfectly vertical. And you can see that I've gone from red to white. I don't think that's the way I want to go. I'm going to start at the top and go down. And this is better. But what I could do is I could do it again. Say the red lower down. Now, it would be up to you on what you decide how you would want it to be, if you even wanted a gradient. I mean, you might want just a straight color. It would be completely up to you. Okay, for our purposes, I'm going to say this is what I want. And when I hide the background layer, you'll notice that we can kind of see the background coming through. And that's fine. As long as the background color in your web page isn't going to hide the red or the white here. For our purposes, this is just informational. Now, another thing that you could do to even decrease the size of this image, and you don't necessarily have to do this. I'm not telling you that you have to do this, but it is one other thing that you can do, is to go into the crop tool and you can actually make it even narrower. Because if this repeats, it's going to keep repeating whichever way we tell it to repeat. We could have the image this big. Whoop, let me hit undo. We could have the image this big or the image this big. It doesn't matter. I mean, it matters in file size, but it doesn't matter in the result when we duplicate it. So I'm just going to make it a little bit smaller, and I'm going to go File, Save As. Oh wait, I think I have to hit Enter. File, Export, Export As, and I want this as a JPEG, or not JPEG, I'm sorry, as a PNG with transparency. And you can see over here, it's 1.1 kilobytes, which is tiny, tiny. And that's good. It doesn't slow the page down at all. Now, when we look at this, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. You can see that checkerboard pattern. That means that the transparency is coming through. So I'm going to export all. And I'm going to change this. I'm going to go into the images, and I'm going to save this as red to white, red to white gradient. And I'll save it. There's a lot of different ways that you can create the images that you want. I'm just showing you the ways that I do it. Obviously, if I've been doing it for a while and I'm doing it this way, it might be the best way, but who knows? It could be just the way I like to do it. Okay, that's it for this video. Hopefully it's kind of short. See you guys.